Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Jerry Miller. It's good to be with you on a Thursday. Fall certainly in the air. I love the crisp weather. Reminds me of college football, bourbon, and tailgates. That's my kind of day, baby. Certainly here in Central Virginia. Pleasure to connect with you on this platform. Excited for today's show. Steve Harvey in the mix. Richard Fox in the mix. Very much enjoyed these gentlemen's company. I've had the pleasure of getting to know them through this program. We're going to spotlight Mr. Harvey and his efforts to unseat a 12-year incumbent in the Whitehall District with Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. I kind of teased the program with competition in any category, any sector is good because it means people are on their toes. Businesses are doing the best they can to deliver either from a B2B standpoint or a B2C standpoint. From a politics standpoint, they do what's best for their voters, their citizens, their constituents in their district. I think this is going to be a competitive race. I've been very impressed with what Steve Harvey has done in his race. We're going to spotlight them in a matter of moments. First, let's thank some of the people that make the program possible. We'll welcome two of our newest sponsors, Anderson's Seafood and Catering. Since 1929, Anderson's has been your go-to fresh seafood market and caterer. Also, IMBS Medical Billing is part of the program. Of course, we thank Interstate Pest and Service Companies. The business started in 1969 with the first generation, Mr. Robert Wells. He used his personal truck, sweat equity, and a dream to build a company. Today, Interstate Pest and Service Companies has 4 generations of family running the business and almost 100 employees in a Commonwealth-wide footprint. We also give some love to the good doctor, Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine for being a part of this program. Sports medicine, physical therapy, chiropractic care. The gentleman is changing people's lives. I see the Crozet Gazette on the show, Colleen Tyler, Kyle Irvin, marketing with Charlottesville Albemarle Transit. Heather Hightower is going to join us on the program tomorrow. Let's go to the studio cam. Let's welcome the fellas to the show. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Jerry.
Our pleasure. Steve, start with you. How's the campaign going?
The campaign is inspiring. I'd say that inspiring is the best way to describe it. The last rally we had over 100 people at it. People were given donations of $20 a piece. I just finished packing thank you letters with Richard last night. I think we had like 60 thank you letters to send out from individual small donations. And I mean, that's the thing that really gets you out knocking on doors every day, is seeing that many people show up, put a big interruption in the middle of their day and come to something like that just to meet somebody who's making promises,
I have a father here. You're a father. I got a question for you. How's the family and the kids responding to seeing Dad rocking the shirt, making a name for himself, trying to do well by the community?
It's really cool. My 3-year-old just turned 3 this morning, actually, and
Nice.
We had this whole thing, balloons leading down to where breakfast was, and all of her presents wrapped. She's probably watching this right now, actually. Hey, Sasha, how's it going? Anyway, it's actually a little heartbreaking, and it'll bleed into the sign thing I'm going to bring up here. The other day, my wife was driving through the entire district of Whitehall to go down to Crozet. So we live at the northeasternmost corner of Whitehall.
Okay.
And every time I go down to Crozet, I weave all the way through the entire district. And it's a beautiful drive, and I prefer it to 29 and 64 and all that. So I pretty much every day, that's the route I take. And they decided they were going to go take a look at all the new signs. We had these signs printed by popular demand, the Farmers for Steve Harvey. And they were, the 4x8s, the big expensive ones, were gone within 48 hours.
Really?
Oh, now, not stolen. When I say gone is we ordered them, and they were all gone out of my garage within 48 hours.
Stop.
They were all up, right? And as my wife and daughter just a couple days ago were driving down, she plays this, Where's Daddy's Signs game.
Yeah.
And there was a whole stretch where there had been signs, and the signs were now gone. And she said in this sulky voice, I think someone stole them, because she keeps listening to the radio where we're talking about this. This is not what I want to be talking about right now. People stealing signs. It's a huge waste of time, energy. It's despicable. It's like completely anti-American.
Yeah.
But anyway, to lead into, you were asking about my daughter. That's the adorable, sad, cute thing.
It's a sign you're making an impact, pun intended there.
Yeah, but this morning we have just one piece of news before we really get into the issues.
Yeah.
This morning, a sign just like this, only 4 foot by 8 foot, 2 of them, so roughly $190 worth of sign, were stolen from a piece of property just outside Crozet in broad daylight at 9:30 in the morning. The owner of the property doesn't want their name released or anything like that. They have filed a police report, but they're rightfully afraid of what this kind of, somebody with this kind of thing wrong in their head who's willing to risk going to jail just to silence, the other opinion. It's crazy. And then they also like took another one of the signs, dumped a bunch of rocks in it, and then threw it further onto their property. I mean, they weren't trying to hit anybody, I assume, but like, I mean, what kind of mindset do you have to be in? And then we have a vehicle description, and so you're looking for a sort of cowardly person, doesn't believe in America, maybe hates Puerto Ricans, maybe hates veterans, probably a bigoted individual, white Ford truck with a camper back.
White camper shell on it.
Yeah, white camper shell on it. That's who stole, $190 worth of signs today, trespassed and silenced somebody's First Amendment this morning at 9 o'clock, just north of Crozet. Beyond that, we're up to, the count is over $1,000 in what is it, 1,500?
Way up. We're closer to $2,000 at this point.
Let's get Richard Fox in the mix, campaign manager. This guy has politics in his blood, owner of Roslyn Farm, grew up in the area. Give us your take. What's going on here with the campaign?
I think Steve hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've just been knocking down the doors, and the response has been absolutely positive. It's been absolutely incredible hearing people just, they're hopeful. They're excited to see a change of voice. They're excited to see someone bringing some debate to the table. And these are people who have voted Republican in the past. These are people who are moderates, and these are people who have supported our opponent the last two go-rounds. We've had people who have supported our opponent the last two go-rounds, offer to host fundraisers for us, throw signs in their yard. So when you're in the community and you see that kind of support coming behind you, it's definitely very inspiring, I think is the word Steve used, and it is. When you're out there and you're in the rain and you're knocking on doors, or just 2 weeks ago when it was still 100 degrees and not 50, you're sweating, you're out there for 12, 14 hours, and just hearing positive feedback, it just keeps you going to that next door. It makes everything worthwhile. I know it definitely solidifies in Steve the reasons why he's running when he's knocking on doors, and people are telling him, hey, I've wanted a voice for A, B, and C, and Steve's like, well, hey, have you looked at my platform? Because that's exactly there, and that just shows how in tune Steve is with just everyday citizens and residents within the Whitehall district.
And with the youth as well. Mm-hmm. Last night we had a fantastic event over at UVA. The college Republicans over there did a phone bank for me, and Senate candidate Daniel Gade actually came all the way down from Northern Virginia and made I think 50 or 60 phone calls or something like that to constituents out in Whitehall. And, it was really inspiring. They were there for pizza, and they connected with voters, and it was a fantastic night. But that's the way the campaign is going. People are just coming out of the woodwork to come out, knock on doors. I just trained last lunchtime yesterday. I trained a new door knocker. Him and his wife really wanted to get involved. But the sign stuff. I got to say one last thing about the signs. When I get this morning, I had
them up.
Yeah.
This morning I got a call from Richard. He goes, "Hey, how'd the birthday party go?" And then I was like, "It's going fantastic." And he's like, "Well, I got some bad news for you." And then he tells me about this woman whose signs were just stolen, and she's paranoid. She's on the phone with the police and trying to stop that. And then I get two further phone calls from other people, one in Earlysville and one in Free Union. I don't know if this person started at one end and made it all the way across the other, of people that also had their signs stolen last night, and they want more signs. And one of them is wanting a field cam to put up, and we're not going to say where that is because I really, really want a video of this. We got two donations for $250 a piece that were earmarked as a reward if anybody can produce evidence to get one of these people charged by the Albemarle County Police Department.
Chad Matthew just said, Ann should match a $500 reward for signs. It's despicable. Signs shouldn't be stolen in any election. Johnny Garver, Jacqueline Greiger watching right now. Philip Johnson in Free Union. Andy Pally gives you props, says he's watching. This man's perspective, I think, very valuable. Owns a farm in Albemarle County, a businessman, follows politics and the news cycle very closely. Why did you choose to get involved in this campaign?
From day one, it was just exciting to have a candidate with just some differing opinions and some differing viewpoints come forward in Whitehall. I grew up in the Whitehall district. My family's been in the Whitehall district since when I ran for office. We were saying the 1740s. We actually figured out it was back in the 1730s. So I mean, one of the first families to settle in the Whitehall district. And my dad, I think he even was the treasurer for Dave Wyant's campaign, the last Republican to hold that seat, the person that Ann ran against. So, even growing up, I was around politics a little bit, and but really just it's a love for the area. It's a love for that community. Steve's always talking about, think of the money shots. Every view from Carter Mountain, where does that look? That looks towards the Whitehall district. The beautiful views outside when you're up on the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th floor UVA Hospital, they're looking out towards Whitehall. They are the money shots. That's where our vineyards are. That's where so many of our beautiful farms are, and so many of these beautiful agritourism activities take place in the Whitehall district. So, when we hear someone is challenging some of these views that over the last couple of years have kind of been, I don't want to say that they've targeted people in the rural areas, but it certainly has come across that way, even if that wasn't the intention. And ideas such as the rain tax, ideas such as looking at the statistical age population of the Whitehall district, it's much older. And these are seniors who I know for a fact are telling supervisors every year, please don't raise our taxes anymore. Do not vote for this next property tax increase. We cannot afford it. And what happens every single year, the board votes on it. Steve's opponent votes for it. I know people were telling her that just this spring. She said as much. And then she goes and votes for the 5% tax increase. So, really, it's and what we're hearing on the trail is people feel inspired that there's a voice that represents them. And so when Steve announced or was talking to me beforehand about running, I definitely said, hey, you're the guy for this district, whatever you need. And I was just coming off of my race from the House of Delegates, and I was involved as much as I could, but didn't really come fully on board until about a month and a half or so ago. And since then, I've just hit the ground running, enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm just loving it. I mean, any job that gets to, if it's going to pull me away from the farm and from helping Alexia do what we do and what we love, it darn well better send me back to where I'm from. And it definitely means something to me, because sorry, Steve, I didn't have to do this. But I believe in Steve. I believe in Steve's message, and most importantly, I believe in the residents of Whitehall. I've seen them turn out in numbers. We've helped get them to turn out in numbers to protest past events in the past, and I know for a fact that Steve Harvey is the best man to represent their needs right here, right now, and that's why I'm doing everything I can to support him and to help him out. Your
colleague, your friend, Elliot Harding, watching Bellamy Round, running as an independent, watching right now. You have Heather Hill watching the program right now. I'm going to get you in the mix.
Hey, Heather.
Let's cut to the chase. You versus Ann Mallek. Talk to me.
So I had a fantastic conversation. I'd knocked on over maybe 150 doors 2 days ago. And one of the doors I knocked on was this gentleman who was, I think he was 94 years old, and his son was there. And I'm talking to him for about maybe 5 minutes. And he goes, I really like your platform. That sounds awesome. I mean, he didn't say it like that, but he basically was really into what I had to say. And he said, who are you running against? And I said, Ann Mallek. And immediately his face kind of dropped, and he's like, oh, I was really good friends with her father, and I voted for her, and, I feel like, that sort of thing. Like he's all of a sudden very torn.
Yeah.
And I said, well, when you first voted for her, I think that there was a big call to have somebody like her representing Albemarle County. And that was 12 years ago. And there was a lot of different type of development, or, basically the policy platform she ran on was extremely moderate back then. And over the years, since the Republicans have put nobody forward for over a decade, her positions have gotten further and further to the left, and more and more extreme. I don't even know if the left is the way to describe it. More urban and less rural, I guess, would be the perspective. And he said, well, her father was my veterinarian, and I said, that's fine, and I've never seen Ann frown. She's always smiling. I'm not saying that she's a bad person, but her policies, her positions are completely disconnected from, he's a farmer. He was living on a farm. Completely disconnected from the voters that live in Whitehall. For instance, are you aware that Ann was the one who put forward the rain tax as a concept for Albemarle County? And he had heard of the rain tax. He wasn't one of the tractors that pulled up here to protest it, but he had heard of it and he was adamantly opposed to it. And he said, I didn't know that. I said, well, we don't have to go on and on about the rain tax. I've talked about it at length. But here's a new one. At the Broadestwood Elementary debate that we just had a couple nights ago, one of the constituents asked a question about brush burning. Now, for the last 6 months, I thought that she was just spitballing in the meeting for the Board of Supervisors where she had dropped into the conversation the concept of a 300-foot clearance requirement for any brush burn from any standing structure or tree. A 300-foot clearance, that's 2 football fields of clear space to do a brush burn, right? I talked about it on this show, in fact.
You have.
But when I talked
Just
about
got
it,
a question about that.
But when I talked about it, I was very specific in saying this is her mindset. This was an idea that she dropped. In that debate at Broadestwood Elementary, she reaffirmed that that is a policy. She would like to see that regulation put in place today. That is her concept for how brush burning ought to be done. And when I outlined that to him, he said, I do not have 200 meters of open space. My farm is narrow. There's no way that I would be able to survive as a farm unless I'm calling up dump trucks to come out here and haul away refuse every time I would normally do a burn. And I said, that's her idea. She wants to put that regulation in today. And if you were to breach that, you would have the fire department or maybe the police out here to find out why you're in breach of that kind of regulation.
Well, let's talk about fire department. I mean, you brought it up, Steve, and what we're hearing as we're talking to firefighters and a lot of EMS people out there in the district and across the county in general is they feel kind of left by the wayside. They feel as if, they're getting representation every time there's an election, and that's about it. And that's unfortunate.
They're being used.
They're being used. Yeah. And these are the people that we rely on. We put the weight of protecting our community, keeping us safe. We put it on their shoulders. And we want to throw them by the wayside. I think it was, 1997, 98, 99, in that ballpark, the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia allowed localities to, enter their volunteer firefighters into the state retirement system. Albemarle County hasn't done that. They didn't do it then, and even after a lot of just advocating for that activity, they haven't done it yet. Now they're talking about it finally, and that's good. Those are steps in the positive direction. But see, 1999 was 20 years ago. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't take 20 years to make that decision. It shouldn't take 12 years to make that decision. That's the right decision day one. And
a $300 tax credit as the benefit, the draw to have some of these volunteer firefighters is, when was it put in place?
It was put in place I think that was put in place back
80s,
in the 80s.
The 80s.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, right.
And the fact that we say that this is like a big benefit, let's just look at what that means. Hey, if you prevent our houses from burning down, we won't take $300 from you.
It marginalizes some of the most important people in the community.
It sounds like a shakedown, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't even allow, currently, all the surrounding counties read law differently than Albemarle County on a lot of things, and specifically when you're talking about the volunteer firefighters, paid firefighting staff in Albemarle County is not allowed to also volunteer. So in other counties, in other localities, You're allowed to volunteer, but you can't do it in the same station, just to try to make it a little bit easier. So if you do respond to a call as volunteer, but then you become on duty, when does your pay start? So they're trying to separate that so there's no confusion or overlap. But the Louisa, Augusta, and other surrounding counties, they allow that to happen. Not here in Albemarle. Albemarle County has already put an investment in these individuals, in their training, efforts and all the equipment. So why not allow them to also be able to go in the firehouse? And also that that would help. And currently it actually hurts volunteer firefighters because you've got a lot of great younger guys who have started in those firehouses at age 16. And here they are at 19, 20, and they're starting a family. They have to go work for Albemarle County and be paid to do this. They need the paycheck. But now they can no longer come back and support the community in the firehouse that they grew up in. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's common sense.
Right.
I mean, these aren't even complicated things. These aren't things related to the revenue sharing agreement or the budget or courts, combining in the same space. I mean, these are just common sense things that we should be thinking of and taking care of. I mean, these are the people that protect and serve our community. Half of them can't even afford to live here. So, I mean, this is the least we can do.
Let me throw this out. We got a lot of questions coming in. This is a very good question. A lot of questions coming in about Crozet. We have a question coming in about Stoner's project. Crozet Plaza coming in as well.
Okay.
Let me throw this one from Kevin Higgins. I live in Western Albemarle, and there's an underlying current of old Crozet versus new Crozet in terms of the explosion of growth. Steve, how much growth is too much, and what would you say to the folks that have lived in Crozet for most of their lives and are uncomfortable with the pace of expansion? That's a good question.
So I don't think that this level of conflict is necessary. I probably, I don't know. I wasn't around, and obviously I wasn't representing the county when the rezoning to high growth happened out there. So I feel like I would have had more resistance to it at the time, but I wasn't around. I was serving the military at the time.
Well, we're talking 1,200, 1,500 homes originally. Some of those first estimates, and people were freaking out at that point about the infrastructure and everything. And if it was only 1,200 or 1,500 homes, we wouldn't be having this question or this discussion.
What I was trying to get to is the conflict there between Old Trail, or like the new people in Crozet and the old people in Crozet, largely is due to the fact that they're sitting in traffic for 45 minutes every morning.
Right. And
so,
heaven forbid there would be an accident on one of the two entry points to Crozet.
Exactly.
Then it's a nightmare.
Well, then
it's snarled.
You might have people starving to death if you couldn't get out of there. But this conflict is generated due to poor planning by the Board of Supervisors as it sits. Every year, the Board of Supervisors sends a list of VDOT, of a wish list essentially. These are our biggest priorities according to the constituents we represent. Every year, Crozet is at the bottom of that list. It would not be too expensive to add in an additional turn lane, to expand a lane, to have a sort of HOV kind of hourly lane to go into IB Road.
Lane.
That center lane could be switched depending on the time of day. I think that we have responsible enough drivers that we can manage that here. These are people that are going to work, and how to get to this. This conflict doesn't need to exist. The planning process for this shouldn't be now. It should have been 5 years ago when we saw the thousands of houses going up out in Old Trail, and the people in Old Trail agree. It's not like there's a conflict. The people in, from Old Crozet and the people in Old Trail
they all
are
want
like,
the same thing.
They want to not sit in traffic for 45 minutes. Right. They want there to be a turn lane and an extra lane to get to 64, and maybe, I really like the way Monticello saved money by not putting in a bunch of lights over by the Monticello exit off 64. They put in a couple of these plastic dividers in the lane to give people sort of the right of way, because there wasn't enough traffic coming out of Scottsville in that particular spot.
How they did that.
And it was basically free. I mean, whatever the engineering cost of having the study done, and then you put the spikes in and you're done. And doing something very similar to that at the intersection of 250 and 64, all of a sudden that exit or the off-ramp of 64 to go into Crozet, that traffic evaporates immediately. You can alleviate a bunch of the traffic coming out of Old Trail. You put it in a more advanced, more substantial turn lane, have them go into their own lane that leads right over to 64. There's also a couple business owners that have their trucks, like large trucks, right there in the middle of that traffic disaster. And they're paranoid for safety reasons. You've got high school students that, I was in high school, I drove a Mustang. I drove like an idiot, just like all my friends
Me
did.
too, yeah.
They are cutting around onto the shoulder in order to get around the cars that are waiting to turn. These trucks are trying to get out, and they can only see what they can see. And they're terrified that one day, one of these cars that are cutting around are just going to slam in the side of an enormous, tree removal truck or something like that. So these businesses have reached out to the Board of Supervisors years ago when this traffic first started being a problem and said, we own property that is south of 64 right here. It's like less than a half mile away. All you need to do is change the zoning. We could even flip-flop the zoning, do a spot zoning, whatever it is. It's not like they're trying to get money by having their property upzoned. They're trying to get out of a traffic disaster.
And it's not expanding the growth area.
Exactly. It's a small spot zoning change. It was already brought to my opponent. She said, it sounds like a great idea, just not right now. And I don't even know what that means.
I'm curious of your take on this.
I think that
Because there's definitely a collision of new Crozet versus old Crozet.
yes, and growing up in the area and pretty much seeing Old Trail go from a farm that
Right.
was a family friend of ours to
what the
now
Bates did.
driving through it.
Yeah.
It's definitely different, but it's it's not bad. Look, we have what we have, and no one should feel pitted against each other. And the fact that people do, and the fact that it's based on things like some of the infrastructure issues, such as transportation, such as the internet out there, and our solution here at Albemarle County is, well, let's continue to look at more fiber and laying more fiber. Well, some of that technology that they've been talking about, there's studies that show 4 to 5 years from now it's going to be outdated. So we're going to throw all this money behind something that by the time we finally maybe sort of get around to thinking about putting it in, we've got to switch. Again, that's what we do. We always kick the can down the road, and that's kind of the reason why Crozet is dealing with some of the growing pains that it is. If we can look towards 5G, do some wireless, internet out there.
Speaking
some
of wireless,
service.
there was an interesting question that came up in the Sierra Club debate about the efficacy or the safety of putting a radio tower or cell phone tower on the campus of Western Albemarle High School. And they were basically getting at, some studies showed that it could cause, risk of cancer depending on your proximity. And nobody brought up the fact that the tower that did get approved for there was 80 feet tall, which removes it as a financial, no one would invest in an 80-foot
It's
tower.
not viable. It's not going to be able to.
So the only
submit.
thing that was approved was something that no one would ever build. And happens to be 40 feet closer to the people that you're maybe worried about giving cancer. So I don't know why they decided to do that. Albemarle or Western Albemarle sits sort of in a bowl, and having a 120-foot tower, you're not going to see it. It doesn't destroy anybody's view. It's not sitting on top of the mountain. If you're going to approve a tower, approve one that can actually be built, that the community actually needs, and cell phone service is desperately needed here. I saw a post on my Facebook about the 3 towers that you have access to, and like one's in Greene County, one's in Nelson County, and one is like in Waynesboro or something
What
like that.
are we talking, 3G in Whitehall?
Yeah, well, I mean, 3G, don't even get it.
You're saying that's...
There is some 4G out there now in various spots, but there's not an awful lot. And some of the Steve's hit on the campaign trails. Look, this is no longer just a convenience. It's a matter of life. It is
Right.
kids being able to do their homework at night, parents being able to work from home, being entrepreneurs being able to create something new. And
this is the lifeblood.
It's a lifeblood.
Yeah.
And current leadership wants to blame it on, well, no big business, no private business wants to invest money in this infrastructure. We must rely on doing it ourselves. We must rely on having a state-run organization behind it. And that's absolutely false. The current problem is businesses are scared to do business in Albemarle County. They're not scared of the people, their customers, their clients. They're not scared of that. They're scared of the board. We saw it with Deschutes. We see it in the poultry industry. For instance, on the books, there's not any regulations against large commercial poultry houses other than meeting certain water runoff requirements. But the commercial poultry houses themselves feel unable to do business in Albemarle County because they feel like it's an anti-business climate. It's an anti-agribusiness climate. Agriculture.
And this is coming from a farmer that does this.
That does this for a living.
Yeah.
And Albemarle County is, our number one commodity is agriculture. The Commonwealth of Virginia, number one commodity, agriculture. We just hosted an agricultural roundtable at our farm with Secretary Sonny Perdue and Congressman Riggleman. Agriculture beats right here. Jefferson, for Christ's sake. And agribusinesses are horrified of doing business here. Small businesses are horrified.
To go on to that.
We have a lot of questions coming in. No, finish your thought here.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
all I was going to say is I spent the last 3 years working for the House of Representatives. My job is to meet with constituents and business owners and any interested party and talk about federal regulation and the problems that the federal government is causing them. See if we can come up with a solution, be that through a recommended legislation or just working through a federal agency. That's what I do in my 9 to 5. In the last 3 years, and one of the things that inspired me to run is the fact that when I would meet with business owners from Albemarle County or, who had decided not to do business in Albemarle County and moved to Greene or Nelson, Fluvanna, one of these other, nearby areas, I would tell them after I hear their problem, look, it doesn't sound like that's something that needs to be handled at the federal level. In fact, I don't even think that is something we can handle at the federal level. You would need to actually talk to your board of supervisors about that. That's how federalism works. That's the beauty of our American system here, is that hopefully the governing body that's governing most to impact your life is the one that's closest to you, and that you can have access to that elected leader and change their mind on something. And you'd think when I tell them they don't have to get Washington, D.C. to start getting the gears moving, and that I don't have to pass federal legislation with, all the dividedness that's going on up there, that they just need to get their board of supervisor to change something, or stop restricting them, or whatever the red tape was that was keeping them in the way or destroying their dream. You'd think they would be like, they'd light up, and they would look like I told them their dog has cancer. And they would say straight to my face, well, that's never going to happen. So you're telling me you set up a meeting with somebody representing the federal government in the hopes that we could change something, but I tell you that you need to talk to your board of supervisors, and now it's never going to happen? That is a really twisted mindset, right. And that's coming straight out of our legislative body.
And it keeps everyday people out of being involved in the process. I think even on your show, you had brought up a question to Supervisor Mallek about the one minority.
I was going to ask that question to you guys.
To serve on the Board of Supervisors.
In the history of Board of Supervisors, there's been one person of color to ever serve on the Board of Supervisors.
And her response was...
Well, she didn't really respond.
It was it was almost shocking. She kind of brushed it off, or I don't really know about that. Well, as a quick question about is, look, stop all these closed-door meetings. Stop these 1:30 meetings. Stop these meetings that go all throughout the week and into the night. Let's actually allow individuals to work a 9 to 5 and then be every day just citizen legislators like we have in the General Assembly, and then let's let them actually run our government, because they're going to know what's best for Albemarle County, what's best for the families. I've heard it even from current supervisors. Supervisor Galloway and Supervisor Dill have always talked about the meeting schedule is kind of tough when you're trying to run a business or when you're trying to work for a living. And when you have, if you replace that with all 6 people who don't work for a living, who are, over the age of 60 years old, that's not very indicative of what the bulk of the county is. That's not indicative of where the county needs to go. There's a lot of talk about people's frustrations over these last 12 years. And, it's definitely great touching on those, but we need to talk about where we're going to be 8 years and 12 years from now. And I can tell you, if we're going the same direction we've been the last 12 years, we won't have any more diversity of thought on that board, ever, if we continue down the path we're going. And so it's important by opening it up just to everyday citizens, you get diversity of thought. And that goes well beyond any diversity of race or economic plight or economic success, anything like that.
If you're talking about diversity, honestly, I don't really have any time for identity politics. However, if we have a systemic issue, like if you're doing Board of Supervisor meetings at 1 o'clock and nobody's there, I've gone to dozens of them.
And that's the reason they're at 1 o'clock, because nobody's there. Well, nobody's there to fight back.
There's a couple federal employee, or not federal. There's a couple county employees sitting in the crowd. There's Neil Williamson with hashtag seats available, and that's it. Maybe one constituent shows up to make a comment. You're not going to find younger people, and if we're talking about systemic problems, typically, at least in the past 15 years, you see that minority people are, if they're getting involved in politics, are on the younger end of the spectrum. That's how it goes. So if we have a system that sets it up so that young working fathers or mothers, or minority people that have families or jobs or whatever, like everybody has jobs except for our Board of Supervisors, save one. They're all retirees. They have a completely different perspective. They don't represent their community.
There's only one Board of Supervisors working a day-to-day job.
Is it right?
I know Ned has a day-to-day job.
Ned has a job, and it keeps him from going to the supervisor meetings because they're...
And, when you look at someone like Norman Dill, who's been a staple in this community for years, owner of Rebecca's, has some other real estate through town. I mean, that's why when it came to certain issues, you could always count on Norman Dill when it came to issues that affected business. When it came to issues that were because he's a small business guy, he understands and he can think about it without any bias, and he's not trying to push an agenda. Him and I may adamantly disagree on other things, and that's okay. But I can see where the common ground is, and that's something that we've kind of lost. And if you continue with 6 people of the same party, the same thought, the same age bracket, all up on that board, it's just Ned's not old, but Ned's also not extremely young either. I mean, he's the only voice for anybody 50 years or younger.
And we're just ending up with these rapidly expanding budgets. The delta between population growth and, it looks like the climate change graph.
Well, and how that
from the
correlates into
90s
age
that
brackets.
They used to do that hockey stick graph, and
Yeah.
the world will literally be boiling the oceans
Okay,
in
Michael
4
Mann.
years.
Let's do this. Let's do this. We have a lot of questions coming in. Why don't we have 20 minutes left. Why don't we go in kind of like a PTI format? We're going to go quick hitting stuff.
Okay.
Let's thank some of the people who are watching. Gerard Smith, who ran for Board of Supervisors,
Okay.
watching
Yeah.
now. Al Schornberg, the owner and founder of Keswick, watching right now. Let me get to some questions. I have some myself. This is from Kevin. Please provide your thoughts on the overcrowding of schools in this district. As an example, Brownsville Elementary added 6 trailer units this year. What are your thoughts on addressing overcrowding in the coming years, which will undoubtedly happen? Good question.
It's a great question. So we've been talking a lot about building a 5th high school in Albemarle County, and I think that those resources, because it's going to be upwards of like $200 million to build it. These sort of things end up getting probably more. If we're going to spend that kind of money and it's coming down the pipe, if we have these same Board of Supervisors, and where they're going to put it is like 4 miles from Albemarle County High School. Right? They're talking about putting it off of the new Berkmar extension. It's not going to cut down on bus times. It's going to require principals, assistant principals, counselors, basically the full staff to put together a whole new administrative high school. Instead, adding a couple buildings to choice locations, Brownsville, Western Albemarle, the ones that are already overpopulation we saw this coming down the road, should have been adjusted already. But now we're here, we've got 160 too many students at Albemarle High School. That's a building, that's 6 teachers. That's not a new principal, assistant principal, and entire bureaucratic staff that builds a high school. And so I think choosing where we spend those coveted resources of our tax dollars is critical. And when this debate takes place and they're deciding where to spend your money, it needs to, we need to have a full-throated debate about it, rigorous debate where different opinions are coming and clashing so that we're not just throwing money at a problem and not actually solving it. So to get directly to the question, they need another building.
I think that, to echo on what Steve said, we definitely need to add spaces to buildings. I remember I went to Meriwether Lewis Elementary School growing up in the county, and it was like shocking when the first educational trailer showed up. It was like, oh no, we don't want that here, and all of this stuff. And when you look at students in specifically in the Whitehall district, but in the county in general, you look at overcrowding, 2 things pop out to me, and they're things Steve's addressed as well. One of which, continue to enhance and stand behind our trades, bring FFA back in school. This will
Love that.
between getting into trades and between FFA and kids are leaving school to go actually learn something with their hands for parts of the day, you can start staggering schedules, staggering students. Another thing is back to the internet access. If there's certain programs that can be done online, why not go for it? I know people think that sounds futuristic and crazy. Glenn Davis, a delegate down in Virginia Beach, has been working on that for years. It was part of his legislation when he ran.
Virginia has an online school right now. And if you're a citizen of Virginia, you can sign up for it. It doesn't cost you money. And if it should be more utilized. But that's another reason, though, we need broadband out here. But talking
Heidi
about
Forson
FFA,
is literally joking about this. I'm in the district right now, but the internet's so bad. I'm having a hard time watching.
Yeah, that's
I have a hard time sometimes on Hydraulic Road watching it on my phone.
crazy.
I mean, the broadband, just 2 seconds, it's more than just entertainment. It's more than just getting your news from Jerry.
It's everything.
It's health. It's business. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned it on the show already, but I met with the awesome rock star surgeon over at Mended Little Hearts at UVA. Have you met with him?
No.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
The guy's hands must be made of gold because he's
What's his
saving.
name?
I don't recall. I have to look it up.
Okay.
But this guy is awesome. He did basically the perspective of the last 15 years and how they've been able to get their survivor rate to 98.7%.
Wow.
So this is open heart surgery on newborn babies. I mean, this is dangerous, deadly business, and they wouldn't live
Internet
without
access.
it. How they were able to get it up to that high of a level of survivability is through broadband access. because they're able to, I think it was something like 92% or 89% before, and they're up to 98.7% because when the baby comes home with the parents, they are able to hook the iPad right in, do live streaming to the doctor. It's basically like they're at UVA hospital for the entire recovery period without being in a hospital environment where there's sick people coming in and everything else. 98.7% makes UVA one of the best hospitals in the country for this kind of procedure. And they're able to do it through broadband access. And it depends if you have the money to live in an area in Albemarle, even though we're one of the richest areas in the state. If you are wealthy enough to live in one of the communities that has high-speed broadband, your baby lives. And then if you live just next to the mountains in Boonsville, then who knows? Like, that's the situation. And there's no reason for it to be that way. This has got to be a primary concern. The average age of a farmer out here is 60 years old. That's not changing while there's no broadband out there, because I can tell you there's no 25-year-old that decides to move to an area where there's no internet access.
Well, and even farming in general, you need broadband for analytics. You need broadband for just reading and research. I mean, you need to be able to access this stuff. And when farmers literally have to drive, some of them sometimes have to drive 5, 10, 15 miles even just to get something somewhat reliable. You can drive 5 miles into Free Union and you're still going to get spotty service. You have to drive another 5 or 10 to either wrap around through Earlysville or come back close to Hunts or Foxfield and actually have something worthwhile. And it's
Let me go back
a way
to,
of life,
yeah.
and it's no longer a convenience. I mean, this is something we have to address. It's something that has far-reaching effects in regards to healthcare in the community and a lot in regards to bringing businesses to the community. If we can have great broadband in this area, imagine the small businesses and the entrepreneurship that would happen in the Whitehall district that would incorporate its beauty. I mean, we would be off the hook with that. And we're just not getting it done. It's a disservice to not only the citizens, but to anyone who wants to do business here. And it's ridiculous with UVA Medical Center, with the University of Virginia, with all the funds from the Commonwealth. And our board still wants to almost sort of work our way towards voting on something that might be outdated in 5 years. Absolutely ridiculous.
This is a good question. This is from Elliot. Elliot says, given that Albemarle has been late to engage in infrastructure, planning, and congestion, would Steve be open to reevaluating a more effective, larger western bypass down the road?
Ooh, with all the money that we invested in the tunnel and the expansion of 29, that would actually require a meeting with VDOT and discussing efficacy of that. Because at this point, I mean, it's 20 years past. I think they should have done it when they had the opportunity. If that answers the question, I feel like the amount of congestion, car accidents, I don't feel like a lot of business is generated by that traffic that's through traffic down to Lynchburg. But as far as putting it in right now, I'd have a hard time saying yes on that unless there was a lot of state or federal funding coming in to maybe come around from Ruckersville. I don't know. I'd have to sit down with VDOT. Probably.
And again, this is a hypothetical question, but there's clearly still an issue. When you look at going up and down 29, yes, it is a little bit easier for about a mile. Now all the bottleneck happens right after the light up at the airport. It's thick through Forest Lakes. Even just the 2 lanes through the tunnel is still, at times of the day, you're still stopped. And I mentioned it on the last. I think one of the last times we were here, the question I got was, would you ever be in favor of eminent domain? I think I pretty much said no. When you're looking at adding bypasses or adding roads like that, you always have to take into consideration eminent domain. Now it would be a different scenario than Dominion because, again, like it or not, we have to do eminent domain if it's going to be for true public safety, for something that the state's trying to do, and that's something that we all know.
Those 2 words, I hate those 2 words.
And I hate it, but we know that that's where the line is. The line shouldn't be, well, we're going to grant a private business this right who is also going to donate to both parties, be the top donor for both parties. That's not what it was about. But if we truly are talking about roads, transportation, things like that, one thing to consider would possibly be an eastern bypass. Again, just thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking, well, there's clearly the need for the western. If the work they did down 29 did alleviate some of that, a lot of the traffic still coming on 64. What if it just went to the other side of Charlottesville and then you're able to squeeze in between Richmond and the other side, and then be able to loop around on the eastern end and still hit up north. You can still tie into 29 or tie into 33 and can tie back to 29. Again, we just have to look at the studies, see. I think having 2 to 3 years of hard data off of the work that they did at the Rio interchange will be good.
It does feel, yeah.
The board, I think, just voted on or wants to move forward with looking at an idea similar to that up there at the other hydraulic entrance at Hydraulic and 29 near Kroger and Emmett. So maybe we go through those programs, see where the data is. The data still supports it, and it's going to be something that's going to be better for our community and something that's going to help business and enable business and help the citizens get to where they need to go. Then I think that's something to absolutely
Without
needs to be
seeing
considered.
the studies, though, I do feel like we are kind of pot stuck at this point. I mean, dumping, what was it, $27 million into the tunnel.
The Rio Road.
Yeah.
$27 million.
What was it?
Is that 27 million?
I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, they got a bonus for doing it a little bit
Yeah,
early.
in time.
But,
Yeah, right.
I guess, do we have a fact checker back
We
there?
can find it online.
I believe it was something like that to put the tunnel in.
a lot of
But you see what I mean then. You're kind of pot stuck. They made the choice. We expanded the road. We added in tunnels. We're probably, I think further down the line, they're talking about more. I would like to see a consistent study on this. Every year, every other year, VDOT, was this the best decision? If we were to make a change now, would it be better? How many properties are we going to have to take away from people if we're going to do
70
something?
million.
It was 70?
69.7 million.
Good grief.
Oh my
Rio Road
gosh.
intersection.
I must be thinking of the one that was the 250.
Let me do this. We're 50 minutes in, a lot of topics. Why don't we go 20 seconds a pop here on a number of topics? This is a good question. Where's the water? This is from Philip Johnson. Where's the water going to come from for this Crozet growth?
So I think that it's important to, right off the bat, look at what the groundwater tables show. We need to look at our current water system. When you're looking at what they just did to the Ragged Mountain Reservoir, we're still waiting for that pipeline to connect the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and the North Fork, the Riviana Reservoir.
Have any more of those spiny mussels been located? Would be my question. But these are 20-second answers. So where are the spiny mussels?
So Steve is referencing, for backstory, we have a supporter of ours, Philip, actually lost a couple hundred acres to a proposed reservoir in the Free Union area that never got built. But then, of course, the county held on to the land, and the land never got sold back. So remember, guys, back to eminent domain, just because the government takes it, don't always assume you'll have the ability to buy it back.
Or use it.
Or
the
even
county
use
didn't
it.
use
Now they
it.
can't use
It's
it.
just sitting there.
But back to the water, we have to be careful. We have a responsibility to the residents who have been there and the residents who are currently there, to the schools. We also have to keep in mind that it is a growth area, so as the homes grow, the schools are going to be more and more populated. More and more businesses are going to pop up. Along 250 downtown, you look at the Barnes Lumber Yard project.
I got to get to that.
Which is a great project for our community in that area. And that's an interesting project because people would assume that was actually supposed to be part of the original master plan, but it wasn't. The original owner had left it out with the intention of, I believe, being able to continue running his business as it was, but times changed over the last, a couple of years after that, actually. Times have changed over the last 10 or 12 years. In fact, every dairy farm in Albemarle County shut down but one in the last 12 years, which is interesting.
If we want to talk about that,
I want to throw that.
Yeah,
Frank Stoner's project, Barnes Lumber Yard project in Crozet. Anywhere you want to go. Let's go 30 seconds on each.
So that's happening.
Yeah.
It's in the works. It's going to happen. It's probably not a terrible idea. There's so many people living out there now. They need these kind of things. I do have concern though about killing the smaller towns that are just north of Crozet. We've got Whitehall. We've got these small shops and stuff through Free Union, and it looks like these towns are the towns that time forgot, and they're stuck in like the 1920s. And I would like to see a revitalization of these areas. Broadband would help with that.
And restored uses, allowing some of these buildings. Look, if you were a tavern in 1820, but owners over the last couple of years didn't keep the property up or let it fall into whatever, you should still be allowed to do that now. If you were a mechanic shop, you should still be allowed to be a mechanic shop.
And that comes right down to the Board of Supervisors and promoting that sort of thing and saying, look, this should still be this. this community still needs a small grocery store out here because everybody doesn't want to drive through the traffic all the way down to Crozet every time they need something. So while I say that the stuff near Old Trail, downtown Crozet is happening, it's probably a good thing that it's happening. I do fear, and we need to put emphasis on revitalizing some of these smaller towns that are just north.
Do you think Crozet Plaza is a good idea?
I think it is a good idea on the face of it. I think that it is providing some connectivity on that backside, on that side of the railroad tracks. I think will help with the current, they call it the square, but what currently is there. I think that because it's not expanded out much further in the growth area, I mean, this is literally taking, there's already the square there, so I mean, this is just adding into it. I think that that's the appropriate place for this kind of development. If it's going to happen there, this is the appropriate place for it. Back to Philip's question about the water, he's absolutely right, and it's something that, we just have to be careful. We have to be careful as we approve, and allow this and that. We have to always think worst case scenario. I feel like sometimes Albemarle County wants to sell us on best case scenario so they can get the votes. But we need an honest conversation. We need someone who's going to look at us straight in the eye and tell us exactly what their intentions are and exactly what this will do to them. And I feel like we haven't had that representation for a while in Whitehall. And I think that straight answers and straight questions and shooting straight would have eliminated a lot of these back-ended, like Steve mentioned. Now we're coming back to fix infrastructure.
Let me get one little connection here between Philip, who is Hidden Fox Farm, and the water issue. So we're talking about, the rain tax. My opponent brought that forward as a concept because they want to dredge out the reservoir or, pull the silt out of there. If you're going to be an environmentalist when you're speaking, it would be really nice if you'd be it in your actions as well. Out of political pressure or friends putting pressure or just people making noise, my opponent decided to stop a project that had her signature on the bottom of it for Hidden Fox Farm. This was the trucks coming out and bringing in soil from UVA in order to fill in some ravines, add some farmland. It was approved. And Mallek's signature at the bottom of it. She stops the project multiple times now, 3 or 4 times.
I think they ended up having 2 stop work orders, and so you're looking.
Whatever the detail is, months of delay. That entire time, there would already be seed straw, and the silt would no longer be coming off that property. Instead, you drive out there, and it's a giant clay pit, and every time it rains, our reservoir gets smaller because
I just got a DM about that. This topic.
They have everything to code. There's a silt fence there. Everything is to code. However, these projects are not meant to be sitting in limbo for months at a time.
Well, and these projects also aren't meant to pit neighbors against each other. I mean, I experienced that in our own personal farm fight with Roslyn Farm, and what Philip's experiencing out there is, Supervisor Mallek in an email is telling neighbors to buy drones, fly them over this individual's private property, spy on them, and send her the pictures. If that doesn't fire up people, if that doesn't get people upset at what's going on, at the constitutional violations, we can talk about tax hikes all we want. But here we have an issue where someone is violating your constitutional right for no reason. There's no evidence. All the complaints, nothing actually resulted in a violation. And you're still trying to violate an individual's constitutional right? I'm sorry. That's part of what got me involved with Steve, I'll be honest.
I didn't think that running a local election would actually result in so many constitutional conversations, but we've got the signs going down, First Amendment. We got the Fourth Amendment through a elected representative recommending to constituents to spy on their neighbor using drones.
And the Supreme Court's decided on that. They've already
who would have thought that we'd be talking about the Constitution?
A lot of stuff I want to throw to you. Commuter train and JAUNT. Commuter train in Crozet and the addition of JAUNT into neighborhoods in Crozet. Let's go 30 seconds hard.
Real
I got
quick,
a lot of stuff.
I'd just like to see a study on that.
Do you like having JAUNT in Crozet?
Yeah, for sure. But I'd like to see a study as far as commuter train. I don't know. I would really like to see a study on that, how many people would actually use it. It's such a short distance that I feel like most people would choose to just drive it. The freedom that you have when it's only supposed to be an 8 or 9 minute drive or something like that.
Well, if we're following county model, then the county model is you live, you work, you play all within a walkable distance anyway. So I think that JAUNT definitely needs to continue and probably needs to be expanded. And I think that that's something that working with people like Brad Sheffield and working with people in JAUNT who also have had experience on the Board of Supervisors, I think that will allow for great conversations.
And it'd be nice if we got some more cell phone service so that the autonomous driving vehicles could actually be testing, with a driver sitting.
Greg
next to it.
Bartlesky, welcome to the program. One of Covenant Baseball's finest watching right now. Another question coming in about the Dillon Rule. Dillon Rule impacting municipalities from an autonomy standpoint, from a freedom standpoint. We're seeing this in Charlottesville. We're seeing this in Albemarle County. Thoughts on the top?
So I would probably have a different answer if I wasn't listening to these Board of Supervisors talk about what they want to do with a reduction in the Dillon Rule. They want to institute a tax on tobacco. They want to come up with creative tax methods. That's what one of the opponents to Mike Johnson is talking about. She keeps on saying, I will come up with creative ways to get more revenue.
She admitted to a cigarette tax. That's a tax on pork.
Very specifically a tobacco tax. And I mean, this is Virginia. We have a very low tobacco tax. That's for a reason. It's a primary industry of this state. And allowing each locality, all that's going to do is drive business out of this county. I mean, if you want to really get down candid with it, people will stop buying and filling up their gas stations, stop eating at Sheetz. If you go in there and you know that you're going to pay twice as much, or I don't know how much they would increase it by, but if you're paying for a carton of cigarettes and it's costing you $10 more, you're not stopping in Albemarle County anymore for anything. You're going to Greene, you're going to Nelson. We've already driven enough business out of the county without instituting something like this. And they'd use it for all kinds of stuff. They killed the Dillon Rule. They're going to go after the Second Amendment. They're going to go after all different kinds of taxes. It's going to be mayhem.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Dillon Rule,
I'm getting letters, and this is not Albemarle County. I own most of this building here. I'm getting letters from the city of Charlottesville literally asking me how I'm monetizing my building. How are the rents?
Yep.
I threw them in the trash.
Yep.
And you know why the city of Charlottesville is asking that? Because as soon as I put how I'm monetizing the building, what are they going to do?
Come up with new taxes.
They're going to increase assessments.
We saw that with the Airbnb regulations.
You saw that.
You see your assessments get altered. You start because you're generating income. You see regulations come out of nowhere because there have been any complaints.
This is what really pisses me off.
It absolutely is.
Because I work my ass off.
And those are the things where the Dillon Rule is necessary. I'm a really thread the needle. I would like to relax the Dillon Rule a little bit and add some home rule components in there.
I totally agree with that.
And that's honestly from being around Elliott so much. And I get
Isn't
where
it a no-brainer?
It is. But when I get involved in a race like this one and I see 6 people of the same thought and the same party sitting up there on the board, and I see one of them is violating a friend of mine's constitutional rights, then absolutely I know that's on a constitutional level and that's a federal level, but you darn right I want to make sure that I can at least talk to a delegate or a state senator or the attorney general's office or somebody else in order to come after that and feel like I can and feel like I have a voice and protect
I feel like you could lighten the Dillon Rule if you had democracy working as it's supposed to work in our legislative system here. But when you know that they're all going to vote the same way on something, you know where it's headed. It's headed to just astronomical tax increases, less and less businesses, and further population increase. That's where we're headed. And if you give them more freedom, I'm a freedom guy, but I see this and it's just one party, one mindset. Can you have freedom in that case? Is it just going to strip the freedom away from all the constituents because they don't know they're voting for these kind of ridiculous policies?
If you were on a seat at the table on November 5th, what influence would you use within the county to assist or not assist the city of Charlottesville with its affordable housing plight?
So I'm assisting the city of Charlottesville.
We already do $16+ million.
We're giving a huge amount of money from the revenue sharing agreement. I mean,
we've got
I don't know.
Affordable housing crisis in Albemarle.
Hey, we got enough.
The revenue sharing agreement is crazy.
We got enough problems to deal with in the county to not be giving more than $16 million a year to the city.
Well, that $16 million could go to infrastructure. It could go to helping the overcrowding of the schools. I mean, these are common sense solutions that literally every single person we talk to on the trail is bringing up, but yet to get 6 people up there to think the same way is like pulling teeth. How about this? How about we just not pay it?
Well, we've got affordable housing issues going on in the county as well, and we also have certain sections of property that were already zoned high growth. We're ready to have developments put on them, but have $18,000 proffers per unit. You know what that tells me? That tells me that you're not going to end up with a $140,000 townhome being built there. because there's no way that you can mix that into it.
Right.
That's over a 10% tax on the end user.
It's ridiculous.
The developer is not going to eat a $18,000 loss.
The developer's a businessman.
It is a tax that you pass directly onto the end user.
Right.
You do not have affordable housing in Albemarle County because you have the county demanding over a 10% tax on any affordable house that you plan on building there.
I will straight up say it on this show. We have rental properties in the county and the city. When they increased our taxes and raised our assessments, I did not eat the brunt of this.
No, you pass it along. You have to.
The tenant.
We pass it along with
it.
Airbnb.
Yeah, you have to do it.
Or you go bankrupt and the bank will do it for you.
Exactly.
You know, and what you'll end up, the downstream effect is instead of building a townhome for $150,000, you end up with a McMansion that costs $550,000 because $18,000, the guy buying a $550,000 house can afford that kind of hit.
Well, then, I mean, look at what's going on in Crozet. You've got development going up right behind an area, Orchard Acres, which is a current little subdivision area where it is affordable housing. And, you know, you're looking at surrounding this whole area with nothing that's going to be less than $250,000 or $300,000. You're going to naturally drive out the people. They can only hold on to that environment but so long before everything else around them is going up to where they're being displaced. And, you know, that's, again, it's not right. And you look at talking about some of these other infrastructure things that we need to put in place and not putting the blunt on the developers and not because they're passing along. Well, if we got creative, if we utilize a little tax incentive financing and things like that to make sure that we have the infrastructure we need, make sure that we are doing the things that we're doing, it's a split cost or there's a tax abatement on the end for some of these developers instead of just dinging them on the upfront end, then we can find that we're going to have a much more realistic approach to actually solving the affordable housing crisis, a much more just common sense approach that isn't going to, there's going to be no stigma behind it or anything like that. It's just going to be part of building. Like it used to be. You used to be able to go buy a $50,000 house, or if you wanted to, you could buy $1 million house. There was no stigma or saying, well, you know, if it's $130,000 or less, it's definitely considered affordable housing, or you qualify for A, B, or C. No, it's none of that. It's common sense approach.
Jerry, can I plug one thing just before we end here? So we started out the show by talking about some sign removals. I just want to put out one little PSA before we get off the air here. We are looking for a white Ford truck that has, what is it? It's a camper back?
It's got a camper shell on it.
Got a camper shell on the back,
truck.
white Ford truck that just stole and terrified a woman just north of Crozet. She now doesn't know if she really wants to have her kids getting on the school bus out there. You know, it's a deranged individual. If you know somebody that kind of fits the description to do that, please contact the campaign. You can find me at steveharveyvirginia.com, Steve Harvey for Whitehall on Facebook. Reach out to Richard, reach out to myself. We're also looking for...
We're looking also for
They stole signs from him. They damaged his property, his signage.
It's not my signs.
Well, we're talking about voter intimidation
at this point. These are voters that call me and are terrified and don't know why this is happening.
If you're going to fill up a sign with rocks and throw it in an individual's property and throw it down their driveway towards their home, that's voter intimidation. I don't care which way you shake it. And it's uncalled for here in the Whitehall District. It's uncalled for in Albemarle County. You know, it's uncalled for in the city, but that's the type of stuff we see in the city and we expect in the city, just like Robert Tracy can't even hold a debate here and right along the city lines or an Albemarle County-owned building within the city lines because of threat of not violence, but just threat of protest to the point that he can't even conduct a fair and balanced forum so people can hear both sides of an argument. That's absolutely ridiculous. But we also are looking for some Mini Cooper that's driving around. I believe it's a white Mini Cooper as well that has been spotted taking pictures of our signs, and then our signs are going missing the next day. So again, just please be on the lookout. If anything looks fishy, if anything looks odd, just take a note of the license plate. You know, I would also challenge Steve's opponent, Supervisor Mallek, again to join in with a $500 cash matching reward for anybody that can submit any information that will lead to catching one of these vandals. Doesn't matter if it's our sign or her sign.
I'm also happy to host a debate with you guys on this show. I've relayed that to her, and it would be impartial and fair. We can even throw the questions in advance if you'd like. Happy to do that.
We'd love that. We've got 3 debates coming up. October 21st, League of Women's Voters at Crozet Library. October 22nd.
This one would be streamed and live in perpetuity online,
which has such a broader reach.
Yeah, it's a broader
phenomenal.
reach. Right.
But also October 22nd at the Crozet Volunteer Firehouse, and then on October 29th our final debate at the Field School in Crozet.
Richard, give those one more time.
October 21st, League of Women's Voters at Crozet Library. October 22nd at Crozet Firehouse. We will have a Farm Bureau and Piedmont Store sponsored forum. And then in Crozet at the Field School, which is the old Crozet Elementary, we will be having a debate there on October the 29th.
And that's Monday and Tuesday of next week. And you can check out the Facebook page. We have all the details on there. Bring family, friends.
I'm going to throw one final question to you. Tim Ryan in Crozet says, this was a fantastic interview from start to finish. Troy Gray said, this is a great interview. He also has given you props as well, Steve. Final question for both of you. Anywhere you want to go on this. And this has been a great interview. We're 70 minutes in. What does Albemarle County look like, say, 5 years or 10 years from now? I'm talking socioeconomic, I'm talking race, I'm talking schools, affordable housing, all that.
So the population is growing by about 1% a year.
It's fast.
It goes up and down depending on the year. That's 1,000 people a year, plus or minus. If I'm elected, we're going to see any new growth headed towards areas that we're currently building infrastructure for, that are already zoned high growth. We're not talking about basically turning Whitehall into a suburb.
Like Pantops.
We're talking Pantops. We're talking 29. There are areas that are already built for it. The infrastructure is put in by the developer, or in combination with the county, and that's where I would like to see any of that new growth go. I'd like to see a removal of these proffers so that young families can actually start living, start purchasing their townhouse and then upgrading later when they get a better job. As far as demographics, it's hard to say. Whitehall is, there's a very small minority population out there. They blend perfectly or seemingly perfectly with the existing population. It seems to be, a pretty peaceful, it's not like the race stuff that's constantly going on here in Charlottesville. You just had 15 minutes outside of town, and all of a sudden people are talking about business, their kids, and their lives, not what skin color somebody is or what somebody just did to a statue. So that's what I see for Albemarle County, is hopefully keeping the peaceful cohesion, the agrarian, beautiful society we have out there. I would like to see a revitalization of some of our smaller towns, Free Union, Whitehall, maybe all the way out in Boonesville. That's going to require broadband access. If we don't push for this and push for it right now, it's going to just go by the wayside. Every time one of these farmers that are 70, 80 years old needs to retire, if there's not a young farmer that's willing to move in and take up the reins and start producing the food, we're eating literally off the backs of our grandparents. That's what 60 years old means for, the average age of a farmer is 60 years old in Albemarle County. We're waiting for our grandparents to finish harvest so that we can eat our food. It's crazy. If we don't get broadband access and cell phone service out there, nobody is going to return here. They go to college, they go, hopefully they go study a trade or something like that. They know they can't raise their kids without the internet. So they're ending up moving into Old Trail or something like that. I would like to see a lot of these old farmers, as they retire, as they decide to slow down or something like that, able to sell it to a young family that can actually get a mortgage from the bank. If you can't get a mortgage from the bank, and you can't do it without some sort of asymmetric, cut the red tape, allow these people to do farm to table, allow these people to do a little bit of Airbnb or a wedding occasionally or something like that.
Common sense stuff.
If you can't do an asymmetric business model as a young family, you're not starting a farm. And everybody just needs to be aware of that. And if you're not starting a farm, these people are dividing the property and creating subdivisions. Those are your options. So
well said. Yeah. Your take on this one?
I think that if we continue down, and I'm going to be honest, I'll be a little more grim than Steve was. I'm
going to be aligned with what you have to say here.
I've seen the trend that we've been going for a long time, and I'm worried that.
What is the trend? To the point.
To the point, our taxes are going up too high, and they're paying for things that people aren't feeling like they're getting a benefit from. People are tired of poor ideas. Look, we can pick apart the final vote on the rain tax 6 ways to Sunday. Was it tabled? Was it voted off the table? It certainly wasn't. A motion wasn't made like was promised to the people of the Whitehall district. And I think that's very important to remember, too. No matter what you get sold on that, remember we were told one thing, and the exact opposite happened. When your best ideas are ideas like the rain tax, and I don't care what anybody says, it wasn't until 50, 60 people show up in tractors on a cold day that you changed your mind. I'm sorry, it's time to move on. If you're still talking on your handouts and 3/4 of your handout is a carbon copy of what you ran on 12 years ago, it's time to step aside. It is time for new leadership. And with leadership, there's certain things, there's certain qualities of leadership, and I see those in Steve. I feel confident that Steve is going to be very articulate and think things through before he comes up with some brash idea, before he comes up with any type of added expense. He wants to restore transparency to the local government, something that we don't currently have. Our current local government is not transparent at all, and it drastically affects business here and new coming business. I think of Steve's military record. Has somebody, he's a medically retired vet, flew Black Hawk helicopters. A father of 3. He's got 2 twin boys.
2 twin boys and a daughter?
Yep.
Dang.
They're 10
You're
months,
the thick,
10 months
dude.
old. Yeah.
Steve is
surprise.
invested for the future of the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Whereas our opponent is looking at it as the retirement for the next 5 to 10 years. Our future for the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a turning point on what the county will look like in 30 years. And Steve has the commitment to that. Steve's family has the commitment for that. I think I'll end it on this. It happened here on your show. You were asking, you asked our opponent, did you ever think you were coming back, or did you immediately want to move back home? And her answer was no. Steve's first answer when he was medically injured and the Army said, look, your final move's on us, where do you want to go, without hesitation, was back to Charlottesville, Virginia, and to Albemarle County. That should be the deciding factor on this November 5th.
We'll close on this. Daniel Adcock giving you guys some props. Thank you, Steve and Richard. Kevin Higgins, I think you just owned a vote. This wasn't an hour loss, it was an hour gain. Fantastic show, really good insight into who Steve is. I did not know who he was until this program. Now I feel like I know him. Chad Matthew, one of the best shows we've seen. Chris Turner and Crozet, thoroughly enjoyed this from start to finish. We're going to archive the show in totality on ilovecville.com, so if you caught bits and pieces, you can watch it at your leisure on this, on your computer at home, anywhere you want, ilovecville.com. We'll take the audio and turn it into an iTunes podcast. We'll do both by COB today. We'll syndicate today's show for 30 days. On 17 Facebook pages, 17 Twitter accounts, an e-newsletter that goes out to 108,000 inboxes every morning at 11 a.m., and of course on I Love CVille, Instagram, and podcast. We close the program the same way, and before I get to the Golden Rule, I just want to say this. All I'm trying to do with this platform is to put local in a positive format and then allow you to take the knowledge that you glean from this program and be more informed about the community. Okay, I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I'm just trying to put knowledge out there so you are more informed. And I think the best way to put knowledge out there is through these, because
With
they're constantly in our
service.
hand. With internet service. So the Whitehall
That'd be
District.
nice, wouldn't
The
it?
Whitehall, I mean, the internet service is a no-brainer.
I think
It's a no-brainer.
he might just be doing this for his own business model.
We're an advertising agency. I mean, people know that. All right, we close the program with the Golden Rule, guys. Be good to each other. We don't make it about religion. Just treat other people in your life how you want to be treated yourself. Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country need that more than ever. I'm Jerry Miller. It's the I Love CVille Show. We'll see you tomorrow with an entrepreneur that's making fabulous strides in the music space, Heather Hightower, tomorrow at 12:30. Take care. Good work, dude. You did really well.
All right.
Good work.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, it was fun.
Always. This
It
was
fun.
great. This was great.
We did a little bit longer. I hope that was okay. We were just fired up.
Flip flops, man.
I do it every day. Every day. Rainbow's a client. Rainbow's a
Can you
client.
snap one of these off?
We're going to get a photo real quick from the package. J-Dubs, take that. Good work, Judah. Thank you, homie.
There it is.
No.